I invite you to turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 5, and we're going to look over a lot of material today. Too much for me to take time to read it all. Beginning in verse 8 and actually continuing through chapter 6, the end of the chapter, verse 12. And also just one reference that I want to call to your attention from Luke chapter 12, verse 15. The title of the teaching today is Wise Words on Wealth. And these words are uttered by Jesus, and following that, he gave the parable of what we call the rich fool, the man that had the bumper crop, and he tore down his old barns, made new ones, and then said to him, soul, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And then God called him a fool, and he died that night. But this is the preface to that parable. And he said to them, take care and be on your guard. Notice those two warnings. Take care, be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. I like what the King James says, in the abundance of things, in the abundance of things. Now, some of you are like me, old enough to remember a popular advertisement of years gone by a financial advisor company called E.F. Hutton. And does anybody remember what E.F. Hutton said? When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Well, this was a brokerage firm and giving financial advice. But when you look into the scriptures for sound financial advice, I would say when King Solomon speaks on riches and material success, people should listen. Now, when Solomon is mentioned, anyone vaguely familiar with the narrative of his life thinks probably of two things: wisdom, and what would be the other thing? Wealth, but I would say first women. Wisdom and women, and then wealth. 3 W's. Well, wealth was certainly at the top. His base annual income from gold alone was equivalent in today's dollar value to $57 million. $57 million a year. The throne upon which he sat was made of carved ivory overlaid with beaten gold. The man's spread looked like it was unbelievable. It included parks, a zoo, a temple that he built worth multi-millions of dollars and was considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. And his own personal residence would make the Biltmore house up in Asheville look like an outhouse or a stable for his horses. It was a grand place. And then all of his drinking vessels were made of pure gold. And the shield of his 60 bodyguards were covered with beaten gold. And then the guard's hair was sprinkled daily with gold dust so that it would glitter in the sun. If you got it, you need to show it. Solomon did. So when Solomon speaks on money and material things, it's time to listen and take notes, especially when he tells us what not to do. And so let's listen in, beginning at verses 8 and 9, where he gives some warnings, not so much about getting wealth as those who want to take what you have from you. Verses 8 and 9, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. Now, the idea here is domination of the rich over the poor is the story of life after the fall. That's been true throughout history, east of Eden, after Adam fell, all the way down to the present time, and probably it's never been more true than it is in the present time. Domination of the rich over the poor is the story of life after the fall. Notice the violation of justice or the perversion of justice. This takes place not in spite of government officials, but because of them. I think this is the emphasis he's trying to get across. These officials are supposed to be checking on each other to make sure that the law is upheld and the rights of the citizens guarded. Instead, they're protecting each other, covering up for each other, which is what watched seems to mean here. I think the idea is the evil has permeated the system so that each tier of the administration is free to work injustice, i.e., taking bribes, browbeating the defenseless, extorting higher taxes than called for, confiscating property and goods, demanding special favors, and commandeering people to work for them because each official is supported in their crimes by his superior. So you got a corrupt system. And thus, he says, do not marvel, because this is kind of a pattern, especially a pattern that was endemic in Jewish society under foreign domination during the time of later years, and even shortly after Solomon's time. Now, again, there's a controversy over what verse 9 means when it talks about the king. Was the king part of the problem, or was he provided stability despite the corruption? Depends on which translation you look at. If you look at the NIV, then the king was a part of the problem. But if you look at the New King James or even the ESV, it seems to suggest that the king was maintaining some stability in spite of all the corruption. Anyway, the summation is this: the poor always, for the most part, are taken advantage of by the rich in one way or another. And his main point seems to be to encourage his hearers to accept this as part of life's reality, since neither he nor they could do much to change the system. Now, we think in America we can do a lot to change the system. Well, that was true in the past, but it's not so true now. Just because we can vote and should vote doesn't mean that your vote's going to count. Or it may get counted more times than you voted. It's just not a system that's easy to change anymore. And one of the reasons why it's not easy to change anymore is because you've got all of this tier after tier of people that are taking monies for themselves, and they get wealthy. I mean, you go into Congress making whatever they make, not enough to get rich on, and then within a few years, your portfolio is worth millions and millions of dollars. How do you do that? It's pretty amazing, huh? Well, there's different ways of doing it, like insider trading and et cetera and et cetera. But I don't want to get off onto the political scene too much. Again, that's the big idea. But let's look at verses 10 through 12 and see how disappointment fills the life of the person given to materialism. Let me emphasize that again. Disappointment fills the life of the person given to materialism. Roger, you got a nice loud voice. Read verses 10 through 12 for me and give my voice a little rest here.
He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep.
So there's the number one, lack of satisfaction with materialism. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. This is a chasing of the wind. You ever asked the question, what is it in human nature that leads us to run after material things, behaving in adulthood like we behaved first as children, accumulating and hoarding possessions that we're unwilling to share with others? This is mine. I got it and I'm going to keep it. That's the way a child is, and you have to deal with them about that. No, you got to share your toys with Sissy or somebody. They don't just naturally and openly and freely say, I'm glad to share my toys with you. You're such a sweet brother or sister. No, they fight over it. They accumulate it. Well, when you grow up as an adult, there's so much of that tendency still within us. So We want to hoard what we get and keep what we get rather than trust and worship the great and gracious God who made us in his image. And being in his image, then that means that before the fall, there was a generosity that was reflective of his nature. Why is it we're so blind to this way of life, knowing that it's not in our best interest, much less in the interest of our neighbors or the world that we live in? Well, you know the answer. You've been a Christian a long time, most of you. It's the breathtaking stupidity of sin. Rather than simply its wrongness that often strikes our biblical authors, it's just stupidity. Listen to this, Isaiah 1, verse 3. I like it in the King James. It says, even the ox knows its master, and the ass its master's crib, its master's manger. But human beings but my people do not know, says the King James. In other words, animals in that respect have more sense than humans because they know who feeds them and they know where they get fed. But Isaiah charges his people that they don't even acknowledge that. So they're stupid. So we go on hoarding goods to our own harm. Verse 13. There's a gracious evil that I've seen under the sun. Riches were kept by the owner to his hurt. So even though the possessions do them no real good, I mean, they obviously there's some good or they wouldn't get them. But I think there are two big ideas there. One is security, and that's false. The other is looking for satisfaction, and that money can bring, and it can't. And the other is power. That's what money translates into. You can be as dumb as whatever you want to call dumb, but once you start getting money, then you want to look at ways to have some kind of influence and control over other people's lives. It works in all areas. So there's a lack of satisfaction. The Wall Street Journal described money as, quote, an article which may be used as a universal passport to everywhere except heaven, and as a universal provider of everything except happiness. Now, that must have been written a long time ago. I don't think the Wall Street Journal has anybody smart enough to write that today, or that they wouldn't write it because they're power hungry. Universal passport to everywhere except heaven, universal provider of everything except happiness. Many, many people treat money as though it were a god. They love it, make sacrifices for it, and think that it can do anything. Their minds are filled with thoughts about it. Their lives are controlled by getting it and guarding it, and when they have it, they experience a great sense of security for a while, albeit a false security. Money can buy a lot of things. I think that's in your notes, right?
Yes.
A skilled doctor, but not health. A high-priced psychiatrist, but not peace. A house, but not a home. Clothes for your children, but not their respect. A vacation, but not enjoyment. A car, but not safety. Food, but not contentment. A Bible, but not understanding. Shrewd lawyers, but not justice. A beautiful church building, but not spiritual people. Companionship, but not friendship. A wedding, but not a marriage. So there are definite limitations to money. But you know this, let me remind you of it. Money is not inherently evil, nor is it inherently good. It's amoral, not immoral. You can use it for good, you can use it for evil, but either way, it's not God. In a cemetery in England stands a grave marker with this inscription: she died for want of things. Alongside that stone is another that reads, he died trying to give them to her. Yeah. But not only is there a lack of satisfaction, there's a load of frustration. Look at verse 11. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Chuck Swindoll comments, how very many there are who appear to be suave, stable, and successful, but who down inside are dreadfully frustrated. The term frustrated comes from a Latin term, frustra, which means in vain. In other words, one who is frustrated feels that all he does is void of purpose. Those who love money will never be satisfied by money, and Solomon calls this kind of discontentment futile. chasing of the wind without purpose. Now, Solomon's statement has nothing to do with tax bracket. He doesn't even mention the amount. Why? Because his statement has everything to do with the heart. You can love money and have a lot. And you can love money and have little and be envious of those who do have money. So you can have nothing and still have an issue with money. That seems hard to believe, but it's true. Because you're either envious of those who do, talking all the time about what somebody should do for you, what the government should do for you. So the issue is not how much you have, it's what has you. What is the controlling factor in your life? The issue is the heart, for out of the heart flow the issues of life. And the issue really is failure to be content with what we have. Excuse me. With increased money and possessions comes an accelerated number of people and pressures and problems and parasites. When a person's possessions increase, there's a corresponding number of people who want to live off of them. Management consultants, tax advisors, accountants, lawyers, household employees, and sponging relatives. Do you know how much the Powerball is up to now?
$1 billion.
1.5 billion. If you were to win it, you'd get after tax, you took a lump sum of around $700 million. How would you like to buy a cheap ticket and find out you just became the winner of $700 million? Do you think that would not affect your life? It would change your life radically, especially when people found out that you had won it and when your relatives found out that you had won it. You'd find 6 cousins, 4th removed from your mother's side. They'd come out of the wood wanting a handout. Then every 501c3 in the world would be sending you everything from a charter flight to wherever you wanted to go to get your money. I'm amazed at these people, people that I love, like Samaritan's Purse. If you ever give to Samaritan's Purse, you're going to get at least 4 or 5 envelopes every week wanting more money. If you ever give to Cru, Campus Crusade for Christ, I gave for some Bibles a few years ago, I get at least 1 or 2 phone calls a month, and I get at least 10 or 12 pieces of literature, and that's just a couple. So again, there's the frustration that comes with wealth, the lack of satisfaction. Then notice verse 12, the limits on relaxation. Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. Now, again, commentators debate over what it means for the full stomach not letting him sleep. Some suggest it means he gets an upset stomach because of the kind of food he eats. Maybe so. But there is a limit on relaxation if you base it on money. The late Joe Louis, world heavyweight boxing champion, used to say, I don't like money actually, but it quiets my nerves. But Solomon said that possessing wealth is no guarantee that your nerves will be calm and your sleep will be sound. According to him, the common laborer sleeps better than the rich man. Again, you could insert some thoughts there. Depends on who you're working for and how they treat you while you're working. If you're working 16 hours a day and you're getting beaten in the process, maybe your sleep would be out of exhaustion, but I don't know, it'd be out of relaxation and good. So maybe it's the suggestion that the rich man ate too much and was kept awake all night by an upset stomach. Let me give you an example. More than one preacher's mentioned John David Rockefeller in his sermons as an example of a man whose life was almost ruined by wealth. At the age of 53, Rockefeller was the world's only billionaire. He was earning about $1 million a week. But he was a sick man. His stomach was in such a condition that he lived on crackers and milk and could not sleep because of worry. But something happened, and his eyes were open. He started giving his money away, and his health changed radically, and he lived to celebrate his 98th birthday. Now, he didn't give it all away because it's still going strong today. But notice a third idea here. Difficulties follow on the heels of increased wealth. Difficulties follow. I read verse 13 that there's a grievous evil. Rulers our riches were kept by the owner to his hurt. Verse 14, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil, just as he came, so shall he go. What gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, and in much vexation and sickness and anger. So here's some of the difficulties that follow on the heels of increased wealth. These verses, 13 through 17, is a picture of two rich men. One hoarded all of his wealth and ruined himself by becoming a miser. The other man made some unsound investment and lost his wealth. And he was right back where he started from and had no estate to leave his son. So he spent the rest of his days in the darkness of discouragement and defeat, not able to enjoy life. Like all of us, and you need to remind yourself of this. You need to put a picture up where nobody can see it but you. Get one when you were born and Photoshop it and take the clothes off. That's how you came, naked, and then take one of yourself now and put it on the picture. And you'll be reminded, naked you came into this world, and naked shall you go. At least in part, until the mortician gets hold of you, and then he makes you look better than you ever did in life. So that's a fact. Job said, naked came I from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord's given, the Lord's taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then we're going to look also in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, where Paul just expands on some of Solomon's ideas. Here's what that verse says. You have that in your notes? 9 and 10? You have it, Mikey?
Yeah.
Can you read it out loud for me? Like you were mad at me or something where we can...
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay.
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love is the root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs.
Okay, one correction. The love of money. You said the love of, and you left out money. That's okay. You get an A minus instead of
An A minus.
Okay, thank you, Mikey. The love of money. Notice it's not money, it's the love of money that's the root of all kinds of evils. And again, that's self-explanatory. You don't have to have a PhD or THD in theology to understand what he's saying. If your motivation in life is to get rich, then there's going to be all kind of temptations. You'll cut corners. You'll face the challenge of doing something dishonest if you're not careful. Again, there are people who get money honestly. I'm not saying that everybody who has money got it crookedly. That's not true. But there is a tendency, if that's your desire in life, to get all you can, then you will do all you can to get all you can and to keep that. Another clear example, and there's so many from history, Cecil Rhodes spent years exploiting the natural resources of South Africa. When he was about to die, he cried, quote, "I found much in Africa, diamonds, gold, and land are mine. But now I must leave them all behind. Not a thing I've gained can be taken with me. I have not sought eternal treasures. Therefore, I actually have nothing at all." Nothing at all. And you've heard that statement over and over and over again. You've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul behind it. And we can't come to grips with this reality that though we cannot take material things with us when we cross the great divide into eternity, we can send it on ahead as believers. How? By investing in the only thing that's going to make it to the other side. What's the only thing that's going to make it across? People. people from every walk of life. And if you're not investing heavily in people in ways that'll encourage them and help them to hear the gospel, heed the gospel, live by the gospel, then when you die, you leave it all behind. And if it's all just been spent for you, then it's not going to be a good situation at all. So, there's the risk. That's what I failed to point out here by the first idea. There's the risk of spiritual ruin. Secondly, there's the risk of financial loss. Move over to chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is grievous evil. And then he goes on, let me read. If a man fathers 100 children, it's like that lady told me about all those shoes. He's sure been busy. If he fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. So there's the risk of financial loss. So we don't know how the man Solomon has in mind lost his wealth. It could have been economic recession. It could be in a bad business move, pyramid schemes, gambling, whatever. But up to date, it hasn't changed. There's an unwillingness to manage wealth based on character. Listen closely. Based on character. There is a degree of character development, of maturity that's involved in handling money. You take a typical sports star today, many of them coming from broken homes, many of them having nothing, but they have athletic skills. You can take baseball, football in particular. They are outstanding athletes. They become All-Americans, first-round draft choices from college, and then suddenly they find themselves in possession of millions of dollars. Typical contract may be $20 million a year for playing a kid's game. It's unreal. And here's the statistics, that within 2 years of leaving professional football, 78% of the players are bankrupt or in financial distress. 78%. Why? Because they don't have the maturity, they don't have the character that's necessary to handle those kind of things. And that's the reason why the majority of the people who win the lottery say it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. Because the majority of the people who play the lottery don't have anything and hope to get something for nothing. And therefore, when one gets something, then they don't have the maturity to handle that, and it proves to be detrimental. So there's a risk of spiritual ruin, the risk of financial loss, and then there's a risk of forgetting that wealth is non-transferable. Wealth is non-transferable. Just as he came from his mother's womb naked, he returns again. Now, I mentioned earlier about the parable of the rich fool that Jesus told. The man thought all of his problems were solved when he became rich. But immediately he was faced with providing bigger barns for his wealth. And then when he had that, he thought he was safe and secure for years to come. But then the word comes, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. And then whose shall all these things be? Thou fool. And again, keep in mind that Solomon was advocating neither poverty nor riches because both have their problems. And he addressed that, by the way, in Proverbs 30, verses 7 through 9. He said, don't give me too much, but don't give me too little. And so Solomon was warning his listeners against the love of money and the decisions that wealth, the delusions, not the decisions, the delusions that wealth can bring. And then last of all, there's the risk of emotional distress. Verse 17, moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. Those who live high often die hard. And again, you can expand that however you think it should go. He eats in darkness. He's depressed. He's sick. He's angry because he's desperately trying to hold on or regain what he's lost. And then last of all, something positive. I want to give you some directions for finding and enjoying God's priceless gifts. Chapter 5, verses 18 through 20. Once again, Roger, read those loud for me. Let me rest. Chapter 5, verses 18 through 20.
Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart.
Now, that's pretty good advice there from an Old Testament perspective. And also then incorporating 1 Timothy 6:7, in essence what he's saying is maintain a current perspective on eternity. Paul says in verse 7, 1 Timothy 6, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. So that means keep a current perspective on eternity, and you don't know how soon you may slip into eternity. You may be looking at the what do you call those, actuarial age deals where the insurance company uses to project life expectancy, and you may say, well, I'm a woman, got a longer life expectancy than men. It's about, 80 years of age or something now, 82 or something like that. And I'm 77, so I got 3 more years, 5 more years. Well, there's only problem with that. You may not have 3 more seconds. You may not have 3 more minutes. We don't like to think that way. Most people, even Christians, I said, I don't like to think about things like that. I try to just keep out of my mind. I don't like to go to funerals. Well, I think everybody needs to go to a funeral on a regular basis just to remember that as that person is, one day you shall be. It's just a reality check on life. It's an appointment that unless the Lord tarries, you're going to keep. So maintain a current perspective on eternity. And remember, whatever suit they put on you, the pockets are no good. They already been checked out, and there's not going to be any money in there. I saw a cartoon once, and it showed this guy died, and people were putting cash in his casket. He just put cash and cash and cash. And this one guy came up and wrote a check and laid it in and took all the cash and went on his own way. I mean, so you got to maintain a current perspective on eternity. Number 2, maintain a correct assessment of the essentials. And again, I'm using Paul instead of Solomon. 1 Timothy 6:8. But if we have food and clothing, with these things we will be content. And then maintain a clear attitude on the things that make life enjoyable. And that is, don't get so frustrated and worried about what may happen tomorrow. Jesus said, sufficient unto the day is the trouble thereof, King James. In other words, this day's got its own challenges, and don't be projecting onto this day what might happen tomorrow. So enjoy life as is given to you. Secondly, fulfillment in your work. And if you've been like me, a preacher for 52 years, my dad said, I never did work. If you weren't a blue-collar worker and had dirt on your hands, my dad considered you non-working. So that's just the way. So you find fulfillment in retirement. Find fulfillment not in getting up and walking the dog and reading the obituary column to see how many people your age died. Just begin to find fulfillment with your assignment in investing in as many people as possible to get as much ahead of you as possible for the glory of God and the advancement of his kingdom, and you'll enjoy life. Then thirdly, and last of all, contentment in your heart. Verse 20 of chapter 5, for he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. I like that. God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. So there's contentment in your heart. Then over one more verse from Ecclesiastes, verse 9 of chapter 6. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. In other words, be content. Cultivate contentment by the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. Now, there are many thrilling stories that have been told about the Klondike Gold Rush a number of years ago in Alaska. The one I'm about to share with you probably heard, is the most impressive and instructive. And I hope it's true. It's been told it's true. It may not be, but whether it's true or not, it's a good illustration. And it concerns a prospecting party that penetrated far into the Klondike. And they came up on this miner's hut. And when they entered the hut, they found the frozen bodies of 2 men and a large quantity of gold. And on a table, there was a letter which told of the successful search for this precious metal. But what happened is this: when they found the gold, in their eagerness to mine it, for fear that someone else would come along and maybe claim it or run them off, they dug almost around the clock and ignored the fact that winter was coming. And so each day the 2 men gleefully uncovered gold in abundance. But one morning they awoken to realize that a blizzard had come. And it was a horrible winter storm. And it raged on for days. And what happened is they didn't have enough fuel. They didn't have enough food. And so they wrote this letter knowing that there was no way out. It was too late. And they were found with massive amounts of gold frozen to death. Now, how like those who are gathering money by the millions, but make no provision for the coming winter of death, to be busy here and there and fail to take into consideration that it is appointed unto man once to die. So I close with the words of Jesus in Matthew 6:33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Present tense, go on seeking first. Make this the priority of your life, and you won't be disappointed, neither here nor there. Amen.